So as you can probably tell from the title of this video, I'll be talking about the declining quote-unquote MCU for the last 5 years or so. And I don't really see it that way, so I'm going to say what I want to say about the MCU, and I'm not going to just come out here and hate on the MCU for no reason. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. My name is Aiden, and let's just get into it. In this video, I'll be going through all of the movies that have come out in roughly the last 5 years, and all the shows as well that came out, and talk about my thoughts on each of them. Let's just start it with the movies. We'll talk about upcoming movies, and then we'll talk about the shows. We started off strong with Black Widow. This movie had a lot of good things going for it. I absolutely loved this movie, and you're going to hear me say that a lot throughout this video. I loved the dynamic between Yelena and Natasha. The whole movie and the whole family dynamic throughout the movie was just amazing. They set up the younger and older sister dynamic so well, and then all the other characters that fed into that family dynamic, like Alexei and Lena. They were both just great characters who had a lot of background, and they did well with setting us up with this story. I believe it should have come out a lot sooner, but they had a lot of good comedy throughout this. They had a lot of good emotion throughout it. The dynamic and watching them grow and become more of a real family as the movie went on was such a good choice, and Dreykov just being the literal embodiment of a whiny old white dude in power was amazing. It felt like a commentary on the real world right now. And it was even funnier because he wasn't even powerful enough to break Natasha's nose. I just liked how the end credit scene set up Yelena being in Hawkeye, and it was a fairly good way of foreshadowing without directly telling the audience, at least in my opinion. There were some downsides of this movie. There was a couple scenes with some bad CGI, but it didn't take away from the main story, which was amazing. And honestly, throughout the whole thing, I loved this movie. I loved every single second of it. Shang-Chi came out right after this movie, and this movie was really, really good. I remember when the first time I watched this movie with my best friend at his house, when it first came out on Disney+. And I just remember us having a blast watching it for the first time. Katie was an awesome comedic relief character, and I absolutely loved that every time she was on the screen. Awkwafina nailed it. The supporting cast of the MCU is very, very good. They set that up so well, and I will always sing the high praises towards the supporting cast. Shang-Chi and his sister's relationship was done very well, and they really did feel like siblings who hadn't seen each other in a long time when they first reunited. Wenwu's backstory was very good, and I really liked him as a villain throughout this movie. He seemed like someone you could really just understand the motivation of. That scene where Shang's mom is talking to him under the water was so powerful, and it gets me in the feels every time I watch it. The fight between Wenwu and Shang was incredibly sad, and you could really just see that Wenwu wanted his wife to come back. The dragon fight was pretty cool at the end, and overall this movie was really good. I liked it. The end credit scenes were pretty good at foreshadowing future events. The CGI was funky at times for this movie again, but that didn't take away from the story. Let's move on to the next. Eternals followed Shang-Chi, and instead of getting an actual backstory, we just got a little blurb at the beginning, and then several flashbacks throughout the movie. Unfortunately, this movie felt very crammed with characters we didn't know a lot about yet. We didn't really get to see any relationships, so if you read the comics, I'm sure you felt somewhat sad for Ajax when they died, but they didn't really have any good prequels before this movie, so you didn't really see any of these dynamics before. So then when Ajax died, you were just like, oh, okay, they're dead now. You didn't really feel much for the character. You didn't have much emotion when it was happening, at least in my opinion. I'm sure the movie would have been great as a sequel to another movie, or if we had like a pre-Eternals movie, that would have been so good, but with what we got, it's not one of the greater movies. They did the end fight very, very well, and they did some like crappy CGI at the end of it, but really the biggest problem with this movie was that it lacked a base to be built on. But don't get me wrong, I don't hate this movie at all. I think that it's overhated entirely, but I do understand where some people caught up with what's wrong with this movie and overlook its good parts. Next, we move on to Spider-Man No Way Home, and this was probably the movie that I was the most hyped for, and I have so many good things to say about it, so I could make an entire video dedicated just to that. But I'm not going to because a lot of people already like this movie. But overall, the fully rounding out of Tom Holland's Spider-Man was amazing. The beginning is definitely much weaker than the middle and the end of this movie, but that happens with most movies because they're really just setting up for the end of the movie. But seeing what Peter had to do to struggle with his life, where he's just trying to get past what Mysterio's done, which is reveal his entire identity. And in the middle, we get a lot of Doctor Strange cameos and some plot integral scenes that allow us to really reach the climax much quicker than we thought we were going to, and then end the movie with such a well scene where Peter's finally really dealing with his actions of fully losing everyone dear to him without them dying and still choosing to be Spider-Man at the end of the day. It really just embodies the idea of with great power comes great responsibility, and seeing all of these old actors come back and play characters for this amazing movie was done so well and felt like a really good send-off to a lot of these characters. There was some misplaced humor and some bad CGI, but other than that, not much of this movie was bad, and I still enjoyed pretty much every second of it. After we start dealing with the multiverse a lot more, we move straight into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which I liked this movie. I liked that we opened with an evil Doctor Strange and just pretty much show how we can see all of these different multiversal variants, and I can see where a lot of these lackluster CGI complaints come into, but a lot of the supporting cast and a lot of the storyline really brought that up higher and brought us to a much better product in the end. Leaning into Wanda finally being just a villain was amazing. It's something that I always knew I needed ever since I first watched X-Men Evolution. And I liked the America Chavez aspect of the movie. I like young heroes and I like sidekicks. I think they bring a lot of depth to characters when you can see them grow up on screen. But back to my point, Scarlet Witch was an amazing villain and they did her hurt really well. I liked how they tried to add some depth to her character with the motivations from WandaVision. But I really just miss villains who did villainous stuff to be evil. I like these cameos, and cameos are something you're supposed to enjoy, and I do when I'm watching them. I don't like how they represent these characters sometimes, whereas Reed Richards isn't very smart, even though he's considered the smartest man alive. The I love you in every universe theme that they had going on in the end of this movie was pretty sweet or weird or creepy. I don't know. It was one of those things, and Christine and Steven was... It was okay. It was weird, because that's just a completely different version of your ex that you're still in love with. So that's just a little bit weird, but whatever. At the end of the day, this movie was pretty solid, and I enjoyed it. Thor: Love and Thunder came out after this, and I've loved it ever since it first came out. I loved it when it was in the theaters. The music and soundtrack were great throughout the whole movie, and I'm glad to see that Jane was back as Thor, and I loved how Mjolnir essentially healed her of cancer whenever she was in her Thor form. But when she's out of the form, you can see how much Mjolnir is draining her of life, even though he's really just trying to protect her like Thor said to. And they handled her death really well. You could tell how much Thor really loved her. Gore did good as a creepy and menacing villain. Props to Christian Bale for that. He was pretty phenomenal throughout this movie, but again, same complaint with the villain problem, because he was redeemed at the end, which, okay, whatever. I like Dad Thor so far, and I'm excited to see where they go with that, especially given Zeus being set up to be a villain with Hercules, which might mean they might bring in Ares as well, and that would be awesome to see, in my opinion. This movie is a 10 out of 10. There is way too much hate, and it felt like there was a lot of love put into this movie. After Thor, we got Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which I heard this movie was supposed to be bad, but I didn't really ever hear why, so I was gonna watch it anyways. Starting the movie with T'Challa's death was done very well. The celebratory funeral to celebrate his life and ascension in the next life really shows how the rest of this movie is going to try to fill the hole that was left by Chadwick Boseman throughout his time as Black Panther in the MCU. Nomar was set up to be a pretty good villain. His and the Atlanteans, or whatever they were called, had such a good entrance, and Shuri being closed off and not really understanding how to grieve the loss of T'Challa was very well done. I think showing her character trying to improve technology so that she could try to save more lives throughout the rest of the movie was done very well, and I liked that there was a little hint to mutants. I really liked Riri Williams' character throughout this too, even though she had a small part to play. It really made me excited for Ironheart, and I want to see where they go with Black Panther and Shuri because of that last scene where T'Challa's son is also named T'Challa, so maybe they'll just age him up with this soft reboot or whatever. But anyways, moving on to the next movie, we got Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, which opened with Kang, and that was an interesting choice. And then Scott reading about himself was pretty hilarious, and then getting mistaken for Spider-Man was pretty funny. If you hate on this movie, one thing that you can't hate on is this absolutely stunning visual artwork that they did on the screen with CGI. I thought they did a good job with Scott's inner conflict of whether he's just a true hero or if he's just a guy who only fights for himself, which is interesting, especially because they've been clearly building that up with these past few Ant-Man featuring movies. God, in this movie, the one thing they did do wrong was that they ruined MODOK, and I'll give that to people. He was so dumb looking, and they ruined the character of him pretty much immediately, and then I didn't really like that aspect of this movie. They did Kang very, very dirty in this movie, and he was menacing, and they set him up to be this absolute ruling conqueror, and then he was just beat by Ant-Man by himself. No hate on Ant-Man, but he's not gonna go toe-to-toe with Kang the Conqueror by himself. Another well-received movie after this was Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which opened with Rocket and the song Creep, and I could talk about this movie for hours. James Gunn did so well with all of these movies, and it makes me really excited for Superman and stuff like that, because I know that he's going to put a lot of love and care into that movie too. Rocket's backstory and all those creepy ass cyborg animals, I never thought I'd be so sad to watch those things die, but they did that so well. They set up those characters very well, and they really made you care about them. Adam was a pretty hilarious villain, and I'm pretty excited to see what they do with him if they do another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And Ravager Gamora was interesting, because instead of just writing her character off because one of her died, they can now use this new version of her in some other way. We can see how she really affects the Guardians further on in the movies too. Everyone in this movie did amazing, and the High Evolutionary was a really creepy and scary villain, and honestly that was probably my main thing about this, is that he was a phenomenal villain. And at the end, I really, really just loved this entire movie. Groot's I Love You Guys, showing that the audience had finally been around him long enough to understand what he was saying, was so beautiful, and I could talk about this movie for probably an hour straight, but we don't have time for that right now, so let's move on to the next movie. The Marvels came out, and when I did watch it for the first time, I watched it for this review. I was excited for it because I watched Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel, the TV show, and so this movie was pretty exciting for me. And I think that they did fairly well with giving these characters a real relationship while they're on the screen. It did feel real, and Kamala was so funny throughout this entire show, and I really am enjoying her character, and I think that she will do very well in this new MCU. Monica, Carol, and Kamala's relationship throughout this movie was such a great aspect. It was cool to see that the connection being made between the three of them, really just this radiant energy. I thought there were some aspects of this movie that were unnecessary, like that singing people scene, but otherwise, this movie was done very well. Lorcans were super cute, and we got to see a bunch of them in the end. End fight was kind of lame and uninteresting, but Monica's sacrifice at the end was pretty heartbreaking, and I never saw that end credit scene anywhere, but seeing Beast again was awesome. And my theory is that this movie got bogged down with how much advertising was done for Deadpool and Wolverine, and it being such a big announcement pretty soon after it. And Deadpool and Wolverine came out right after this. I couldn't stop hearing about this entire movie. I don't know if it was just because Ryan Reynolds was posting about it so much, But this movie was absolutely amazing, and every time I watch it, there's something new that I missed before. Bringing back Hugh Jackman as Wolverine was a great choice to be able to finally send off his character. So it's time we moved on from his version of the character and let someone new take the role. This movie did an amazing job to send off the Fox universe and all their characters. This might be the only movie on here that I say is perfect and everyone else on the list agrees with, at least in some parts. All hail Marvel Jesus. So Captain America 4 came out on February 14th. So if you really don't want any spoilers, you can skip ahead to whatever timestamp's on the screen now. If you're still here now, I know you won't care about these spoilers. This movie was done so well, in my opinion. I have so many thoughts about this movie. Firstly, Sam's suit was done beautiful. It was so gorgeous throughout the whole thing, and it looks like an upgraded version of what we saw in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but I am in love with this entire thing. And the way Sam moves was just so much how like Steve moved, and they did such a great job with that choreography. I barely watched the trailer, so I didn't know much about it, but the big obvious thing that I did know was that Red Hulk was going to be in this movie, and they did way too much marketing on Red Hulk. If you went to go see this movie for Red Hulk, you were probably let down. That is the end of all the movies that have come out so far. We have a lot of ones like Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four coming out pretty soon. I cannot wait for all of these movies. I think that they'll do very, very well. And really, I'm just excited for the Fantastic Four in the MCU finally. And I can't wait. Moving out of the movies, see what I did there? And onto the shows and shorts that we have. We're going to start off with WandaVision. The slow reveal throughout this first couple of episodes that Wanda is controlling everything was done so well, and Vision realizing that he was killed was just a great plot point to have. They really just did a great job with setting up all of these different themes throughout these episodes and really just changing the era every time the new episode would come. I liked Billy and Tommy. I thought they were interesting characters, and I was very excited to see what they did with them for the next movie, or for at least the next project that they're in. Agatha's setup for her own show was done so well. They seriously did well with the slowly foreshadowing of how she was manipulating Wanda and the rest of Westview. The way that Monica got her powers was a little bit lame, in my opinion, but that was probably my only complaint throughout this whole thing. Everything else was cool, and I'm very excited for the Visions show that's supposed to come out soon, or in a couple years, whatever. I'm excited for that. After WandaVision, we got the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Sam's struggle throughout this whole thing with his identity as Falcon or as Captain America was done very well, and seeing Bucky struggling with what he did as the Winter Soldier was also an amazing choice. They really worked it out in the end of it for them to both finally realize what their roles in society kind of were. And I really liked what they did throughout this entire thing with Bucky and Sam's relationship and really just working off of each other. I was really happy to see Sam's Cap costume. Isaiah was an interesting character, and I'm hoping that they will dive deeper into his character as more of these shows go on, and our shows and movies go on, but it's unlikely that they'll talk about him much more. The terrorist group, yes, terrorists, sorry Sam, they were terrorists. No matter how misguided they were, they're still terrorists. Was an interesting villain. I don't get people's hate around Captain America. Sam literally embodied what it meant to be Captain America. He stands for the dream and not the government, and this show was done well. It really showed that. We got the first season of Loki, which was so good. I rewatched it with my girlfriend. I forgot how good the TVA was as a villain, and it's actually so unfortunate that the Kang Dynasty didn't work out, because he was a damn good villain in this. Sylvie and Loki falling in love with each other was awesome, because it showed how narcissistic Loki is while showing how capable of love he is. Loki Season 1 was a masterpiece, and all the characters in this had an amazing role. I saw no flaws with this show thus far. Tom Hiddleston was a great cast, and he's putting in so much into this character, even if his main parts of the MCU might be over for now. Hawkeye had an amazing 6 episodes. I loved the portrayal of Clint and his PTSD from the years of being a hero and showing how much he missed Nat. I was also very happy to see his family, and he's not just forgetting them when he met Kate. Kate's family dynamic was also pretty funny. Her stepfather was probably my favorite character throughout this series, and it was just funny throughout the whole show. I loved it. When they introduced Yelena into the series, it was awesome. They delved a little bit into her backstory some more, and that was pretty good. I'm glad we're seeing more of her. And Echo was also such a good villain. I liked seeing her henchmen and her relationship with this like mob at Kingpin and everything like that. And Kingpin getting some scenes was done so well. And I was super happy about it because it just really brought the whole MCU together to have the Daredevil shows all be canon. Especially with it also being in Spider-Man No Way Home and stuff like that. Also at the end with Yelena and Clint both knowing Nat's song was super sweet, and Kate becoming an honorary member of the Barton family was very good. There was no complaints about this show. They did so well with Moon Knight. They cooked very, very, very hard with this show. The relationships between Mark and Khonshu and Steven were all done so well. Oscar Isaac was a phenomenal actor for this entire show. You know you're a good actor when you can make the dynamic between yourself seem so casual and real, and they did such a good job with the costumes and special effects for the most part of the show. And Layla was a good love interest, and it was super awesome seeing her as Scarlet Scarab, which I didn't know even was a character until I watched this show. I've said this before and I'll say it again. There's nothing bad about this show, really. They did Mark and Steven's backstory so well, and it was actually so sad to see them both suffer like that. Amit and Harrow were good antagonists throughout this story, but the last fight was a bit anticlimactic. That end credit scene with Mark, Jake, and Khonshu talking to Harrow was so crazy. For not watching the show before, I seriously cannot believe that I never did it. We got Miss Marvel right after this, which was a really, really good show, and I was very impressed by it. The animation mixed with the live-action performances was something that I very much enjoyed in this show, and my favorite sequence had to be the one right after Kamala met Kamran, and when Kamala was daydreaming and lip-syncing along to the song that was playing. I believe this show got bogged down by the lack of advertising, as it's one of the most visually stunning Marvel shows that I've ever watched. The Department of Damage Control was a decent villain. I didn't care much for them throughout this entire thing. But the final battle where Kamran seems to start to lose control and get angry was a great scene between him and Kamala. Honestly, I didn't have much to say that was bad about this show. I really liked that they changed her powers from a little bit from the comics. That was super cool to see, and it was super cool that she was a mutant. After we got Miss Marvel, we got She-Hulk Attorney at Law, which was not great, but it's not that bad. Jen was a good protagonist throughout this. She was pretty hilarious, and her breaking the fourth wall didn't bother me because she's done it in the comics a million times. You know, I've got some comics over there. Well, actually, my dad has some comics over there, She-Hulk comics, and she breaks the fourth wall in them. So it's not that big of a deal. You guys need to stop. Hulking was a good villainous group, and it really pissed me off throughout this show, and seeing just all this character development for Jen throughout this, however many episodes it was done very well. Showing the women in this show and all the struggles that they go through every day was an amazing character choice, and it brings the problems that aren't really talked about to the forefront of the MCU. And I mean, they haven't exactly advocated for feminism very well until this show, and I thought that Jen was a great character to do that. Daredevil and Jen had a good relationship throughout this show, and the acting was super believable. I hope they do more with Jen's character as the MCU goes on, despite how the CGI was pretty bad at points, but I really liked the story, and I hope there's some more and better She-Hulk, Hulk, and everyone representation throughout the rest of the MCU. And I forgot how much I liked the Hulk family as characters, and it was done okay in the MCU. They didn't really know what to do with the Hulk, so they've kind of just been made him Smart Hulk and Banner and stuff like that. But Jen was a good character, and I liked what they did with She-Hulk in the end. I didn't like some of the... I liked what they did in the end, alright? Werewolf by Night, which, if I'm being honest, I never even knew existed before I started rewatching these shows for this video. It wasn't great, in my opinion. I tried really hard to find good things about all these projects, but there wasn't really much to say about this one. The black and white visuals were a good choice for some of these dark characters, and the writing of the story was not horrible, but it was lacking in some spots. And some of the transformations were cool, being off screen with the suspense. And then making the main attack at the end was cool, but then it was kind of ruined because the costume design wasn't amazing. But this short was okay. If you are a fan of Werewolf by Night, you might like this. I never even knew he existed, so I didn't really care for it. Ending 22, we probably got the best holiday special that I've ever seen for anything ever in my entire life, and that was Guardians of the Galaxy. Mantis and Drax just trying to make Peter happy on Christmas was so sweet, and I love how Kevin Bacon came around to helping them in the end. And Mantis really telling Peter about their father was so sweet, and I loved this short. I could watch it any time of the year, and I'll still love it every time. Yondu giving Peter a gift was so adorable, and I loved this short so much. Guardians of the Galaxy just can't do any wrong, in my opinion. They did so well with all of these. Secret Invasion was kind of weak. That's not reinventing... We're not reinventing the wheel here, guys. Secret Invasion was not a great show. For the sake of consistency, I watched this even though I didn't want to, and many people said that it wasn't worth watching. I still watched it. I tried to keep an open mind, and this show was something. Nick and Vara, or Priscilla, as some people know, the chemistry was done well for that, I think. Between the two of them, they were very good on the screen, and Fury being on the outside of everything was so good, too. I liked seeing him have to deal with pretty much everything basically by himself throughout this. I get why people didn't like this show. There was some shoddy writing and acting, so yeah, it makes sense, but this is one of those shows that doesn't really have a good place in the MCU. Gravik was an alright villain, and I'm glad that Feige later retconned that Rhodey was revealed to only be a Skrull since, like, Endgame. The Skrull ideology and the exploration of racism was done pretty well. They explored this topic a lot better in The Falcon and Winter Soldier, but they still did some aspects of it right here. Gaia's impression of Fury had me tweaking in the last episode, because I thought they just wrote his character horribly until it was revealed that it was just Gaia as the Skrull. And thank God that it was. The last battle was pretty good. And overall, this show wasn't anything to write home about. Not as horrible as people say, but it was not that great either. After Secret Invasion, we got Loki Season 2. And oh my God, was a beautiful masterpiece and send off to a beloved character that so many fangirls love. Honestly, just the glorious purpose scene itself, I could have an entire video about. But Loki Season 2 was as close to perfection as a show dealing with the multiverse and evil animation clocks can get. In my opinion, the only real downside to this show is the short amount of episodes that it and all the other live-action Marvel shows since 2020 have had. The cameos were great, the storyline, ending, interconnectedness, redemption of Loki, all of that was just seriously amazing, and this was probably one of the best shows on this list, in my opinion, and my girlfriend's too, if anybody else was wondering. After this, we got Echo, who was the main antagonist of Hawkeye, now having her own show. And this was done super well. She had some awesome badass moments, and they really brought Charlie Cox in for a minute of screen time, and it was awesome. Maya's backstory and exploring her native heritage was done pretty well. I'm glad that they're really fleshing out all these characters that they're choosing to use in different Marvel shows, and it's really just showing all of these different backgrounds of ethnicities, sexualities, disabilities, and so much more. It fleshes out these characters and makes them feel human and different from one another. This is one of the Marvel shows that I really liked my first time watching it. I seriously loved this one, but I also think it hit a little bit close to home with me because my girlfriend is also part native, so it was a lot more interesting for me to watch because I could relate to it a little bit. We got Agatha All Along in September, and this was such a good show. Marvel did so well in 2024, I seriously can't get over how much people dislike all these projects. Agatha's relationship with the Coven and just the entire Coven talking to each other and interacting with each other was so weirdly believable. Every episode, or nearly every episode, focused on a new witch's trial, and that was so good. It was like a mini movie for all these characters that aren't well enough known to get their own project, and the acting was so phenomenal. I cannot stress enough how much Agatha's storyline and backstory for everyone was so good, and Teen being revealed as Billy was done so well too. The Magneto Easter eggs with Billy taking over a Jewish kid's body was awesome, and Lilia's tarot reading and Billy trying to find Tommy and bring him back, leading straight into that sweet reveal that Billy actually manifested the road, was done so well. Agatha's and Nikki's relationship was done really well in that last episode or pre-last episode, whatever it was. It was done well, and manipulation of others because of his death was so evil, and I loved it. Can't wait for the Wiccan show or movie or whatever it is, and I hope they do bring back Speed. It'll be nice to see. With that, we're pretty much caught up. I'm doing a Daredevil Born Again full series review as we speak, so I'm not going to just go into that here. You can watch those other videos if you want to watch those. The rest of the shows I've seen for 2025 I haven't seen much about so far, but I'm excited based on the lineup of characters that we will be able to see. Making this video has actually gotten me so hyped for all the coming content, and if your biggest complaints of the new MCU is that the CGI isn't great or that there's too much comedy, I tell you to go rewatch some old MCU movies and tell me that there isn't poorly placed comedy or bad CGI. Just shut up. Quit hating on things just to hate on it. Life is so much better if you're just happier and enjoy the stuff more, and I liked these movies and shows. I don't know how to end this video, so I watched a lot of Marvel for this. This is how many hours I spent watching Marvel, so yeah, subscribe and stay tuned for more videos. I have an Instagram and TikTok and stuff like that. It's all on the screen now. You can follow it or not, but leave a like, subscribe, comment. Have a great day. Okay.